Hey guys, in today's video, I'm super excited to be teaming up with Will Anderson, fellow Scrabble YouTuber and former North American Scrabble champion, and of course one of my close friends, to be going over one of the two very interesting games we played at this summer's Scrabble Players Championship held in Hanover, Maryland. Now, we played two exciting games at the summer's championship, and the one we're going to be going over today is actually the second of these two games that we played. And it was a pivotal game. We were in first and second place, respectively, going into the critical final day 4 of the championships before the two finalists were decided. So, a lot at stake here in this game. And in today's video, we're going to be going through each of our turns and thought processes in extensive detail. So, it's going to be a fairly long video, but it should be very educational and hopefully interesting and fun for all you guys. There's going to be another video going out this Sunday, which will be taking place on Will's channel, where we similarly discuss our first game we played at the Summer Championship in this kind of detail. So definitely check out Will's channel this weekend. Don't miss that video. And with all that, let's go ahead and jump into the game. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks so much for watching.
So in this game, you are the player going first, and your first rack is a few too many vowels, and here you make a pretty standard play, which every cat around the world is a moving tribute to those kitty cats.
Yeah, no, I took a little bit of time here, not that much, probably about 30 seconds or so, just first making sure I don't have a bingo, because I'm close to a bunch of eights like Solatium or Solarium or Laminus. Like, this is a kind of rack that's not even bad to go second with, because if Will floats an N and R or a T, I would get a bingo. It's certainly not enough of the time that it's worth considering any sort of shenanigans, like trying to play an intentional phony here, hoping Will challenges a off and then floats a tile. That's not really my style and not something I'm going to do here. So yeah, as Will said, I played one of the many spellings of meow, which I think is perfectly fine.
Yeah, pretty standard. Meanwhile, I have kind of weird tiles, the WU combo that I'm not thrilled about. And I'm looking here for a little while, thinking about plays like Yowza into this A, but ultimately I decide that I can actually use the same tiles to score 31 to get a few more points here. This does open two triple word scores back to you, but they are deceptively not that easy to hit. There's certainly plenty of racks that aren't gonna be that easy for you to play sixes, hitting those triples, and it's just kind of a standard play that gets rid of my WU combo by shedding the W, scores the Z on the double. It seems very standard, and the sim agrees. This was your situation, so you made the runaway top equity play here, but you had to at least be thinking, man, do I have to play this here?
Yeah, so the play I made was My and Musty above the Y that Will just opened in Woozy, and it looks a little strange at first because it gets rid of my S, right? Like normally here, especially with the Meows hook open and fairly difficult to block, it feels like a tile I really want to keep to try to bingo there. This play just simply scores too much compared to my other plays. Really, if I'm going to use that spot above Woozy, which really stands out, my only play that doesn't use the S is My and My, which is it's kind of bad, honestly. It's 26 points, but LURST is just not a good leave. Like, yes, oftentimes if I draw an E especially, I am going to bingo, but there's so many times that I don't. I draw like II or IN or something that just leaves me in one of those situations I hate so much, where you have all these 7 tiles, you're not bingoing, you have all 1 pointers, and you're going to be scoring like 12 points on your next turn. So I decided here that, yes, I have an S, it's valuable, but there's 3 more S's to come, there's 2 blanks to come, I'm scoring like 12 more points, I'm turning over more tiles. Yeah, weird play to make. It probably took me a minute or two, but I think it's correct.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely think the extra points and making sure you're not going into next turn with such an imbalanced leave as you would after my makes a ton of sense. And back over to me, I draw the X. And I think I made this play very quickly, feeling like there's no way it couldn't be correct. But I just played the Greek letter XI here for 38, leaving not the best leave of ride and a U, but I did miss Editrix here for 10 extra points, which I feel like that is just the right amount of points that I should have gone with this instead of just my X play. No, it's not great to leave a lone U going into next turn, and yeah, I do float a nice letter that plays somewhat productively going into the triple with Editrix, but 10 points is a lot, and I just didn't generate that as a choice. I would say that's probably a 2 to 3 point valuation mistake here, something in that range. Just didn't think about it, and but yeah, maybe a slight missed opportunity. But oddly, it works out okay for me, as ultimately I'm not sure what, if anything, you would have had, but your draw is very kind of, you do draw another S, so that's good, but this is a really brutal, awkward turn for you here.
Yeah, and it's a little ironic because this is the exact kind of rack I was sort of hoping to avoid with Musty, right? And then I was worried I would fall into with Maya. Here I am again, right? 7 1-pointers. Looks like I might have a bingo, but I don't have a bingo. And again, it's like I can't score anything, right? Because I have all these 1-pointers. There's no crazy overlaps or extensions or anything. Like I said, there's no bingos. And I'm just looking at this board, and I literally can't find anything that scores more than around 12 to 15 points. Like Larn, which scores 16 points, which is kind of respectable for a rack like this, and it keeps ELS, which, again, it's not a bad leave by any means. In fact, it's a very good leave. It's just not that strong relative to how good the rest of this rack feels. And I ultimately decided that I do want to play in that spot because, the double word score above the IS is potentially pretty risky. I thought there was even a chance that Will maybe had the Q with XI and was trying to set it up for cheese. Again, he could have it, he could not have it. There's multiple Vs that are going to go there and bail him out of a lot of racks. So, and in the end, I actually decided to make what for me is a pretty unconventional choice and just drop the L with LIS for 6 because the rest of the leave of AEL NRS is really strong. And as much as I hate one tile fishes, it bingos a lot. And I have this line with meows that if Will doesn't have an S of his own, is very likely to stay open. It's pretty difficult for Will to make any plays or effective plays in that spot that block it. And I look at the most common tiles in the bag. I'm hitting Arsenal with an A, Leaners with an E, Nailers with an I, Loners with an O. I could go on and on here. At NRT, I'll leave you guys to find the bingos, but those also make bingos. So the 7 most likely letters in the pool I'm bingoing with, and many others as well.
Yeah, so
So
many others. It's just so strong. Yeah, it's like
exactly.
and even if I do manage to block the S hook on meows, it's almost certainly because I played a 6 letter word ending in a vowel, which opens 4 or potentially 5 good places for you to play eights, which means with that leave after you just dump your L, you're going to bingo through that a huge majority of the time as well. So, yeah.
Exactly. And again, it's not like Larn is anything that special, right? It's 16 points. If I were getting 30 for it, then sure, I would take it. But it's only 10 more points, and my bingo percentage is probably like 40% more after just dropping the L. So if you think about it, right, from 40% more to bingo, the bingo is a 50-point bonus. That's an EV of increase of 20 points right there, just from the bingo bonus alone. This is easily the better play.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that these are the type of plays that you try to stay away from in general, preferring those smoother outcomes. But anyone, no matter what their preferences are, need to recognize that sometimes the best play is going to be to play one tile when your leave is that strong and when you don't have a good enough scoring play to offset the variance of scoring so low and pinning all of your hopes on a bingo. That's Scrabble, right? That's theory. Sometimes it's best, and here it seems very clearly best to just play the L. Makes a ton of sense to go against the grain, your usual grain. And here, the difference between my X play and Editrix is that with my leave of a Dire and a U, that is going to bingo maybe a little bit more often than just a U by itself. And here I get lucky that my lone spot to bingo remains open. Uridinia, this is by far the best play. There is no other bingo, and scoring 68 points with these letters is a godsend. So I'm thrilled that I get to bingo with this. Not that much to think of. If you know that word, it's coming down quick in that spot and back to you, and you draw an R, which this to the point of like, you really got hosed to draw an R, but your leave is so good. That's the point of good leaves, that even the crappy draws that look not ideal still work out for you pretty well.
Exactly. And like I said, an R is one of the tiles I had considered. Usually if I do consider a rare one tile fish for me, my first approach is look at the most likely letters in the bag, right? Because I'm a lot more likely to draw something like an E or an R than I am to draw a V. Obviously, a V would be bad, but it's not likely. There's only 2 Vs in the bag, and I knew that I would hit Snarler if I drew an R, which does still play with meows, but in this case I decided it actually is not correct, and this is why it's important, guys, not to rush, right? You always want to consider what your opponent just played and whether they might have opened something better for you, even if you have what feels like a standout play. And before Will's bingo, Snarler was indeed my only playable bingo, but he has given me either relearns or learners through the E, which scores a little bit more and is a little bit better defensively. So I ended up going with that. I am down slightly, but my deficit's going to be fairly minimal at this point in the game. There's no reason to play Snarler and leave Will the whole left-hand side of the board to work with for bingoing, and also a potentially dangerous Snarler's hook with two S's left.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Also worth noting, you could slot this word further down, but why give me the first crack at getting a double-double with an S in it? If I draw something good, both blanks still available, I could easily, the S we know likes to end words, but it also is the most common starting word starting letter, I should say, for 8-letter words. So very wise choice, I think, just to remove any doubt that I could get lucky, draw something huge, and score 90 to 100 points on my next turn. Makes total sense. So meanwhile, back to me. I draw kind of weirdly, but again, I'm feeling fine. You did bingo. I had to fully expect that after your play of just L, the L, you had to have been close. And I'm still up by 6 going into this turn. So here, I actually did see the sort of static best play of Dipody right here, leaving RT and scoring 26, but I just felt like this instantly creates by far the best scoring spot available on the board. It's just so easy for you to either play something long into the D, something through the D to the triple, or maybe even a 4-tile overlap going down, which is going to score huge. No need to incur that risk when I have another play like Point, which scores similarly, only a 2-point sacrifice, and the leave, yeah, I do keep another consonant, but at least it's a somewhat synergistic 3-tile group of consonants that could easily turn into a bingo. So I think this is clearly safer and better, and the engine agrees with that choice. So not too much else to say about that one. As we move over to your next turn, and you draw a whole bunch of N's, Mac.
Yeah, the three of them to be exact, which I'll go on record saying is definitely not the most ends I've had on one rack at a time. It's funny. I'll tell this story. Once I was sitting next to Joe Edley years ago, probably about 10 years ago, and he managed to play a bingo with 4 ends on his rack. He played non-union. So
There you go.
yeah, ends are bad, but there are words with with a lot of ends. I'm not that far off of stuff like 9 pins even over here, but there is no playable bingo. And yeah, I make a play here I was pretty happy with. I played Penny to the Y in Musty, which accomplishes a lot of things, right? It scores reasonably well for a rack like this, 20 points. Cleans out my rack. ONS is a fantastic leave relative to the range of leaves I could keep here. And it also sets up my S for Spinny, which is something I'm happy to do. I'm not down so much that I feel like I have to do this. I'm only down 30 points, which is going to be very little after my next play, but with only one S still unseen, and Will almost certainly not wanting to use a blank for that unless he happens to have a bingo, the odds of him having a really damaging play there are pretty small. Of course, he's often going to play to the right of the P and block the line anyway, but I was okay with that because the I is actually a fairly difficult vowel to overlap to the right of. There are far, far fewer two-letter words starting with an I than, say, starting with an A, an E, or an O. He pretty much has to have a D or a T there, maybe an F if he's going to hurt me. So I wasn't too worried about that. And I figured, too, a lot of the times this is going to induce Will to sacrifice points to block, right? He might not have a good play there. And he's probably thinking if I make this play that, and thinking correctly as it turns out, that I have an S, and he's going to be rightfully afraid of that spot. And maybe he's getting ready to play elsewhere, but he decides he has to sacrifice a lot to block that spot out of fear of me hitting a big play with an S, right? Which is actually a win for me. If Will's going to score 35 elsewhere and he decides to score 20 to block that spot, I've basically just gained 15 points. So like there's a lot of value to making these openings, even if they don't stay open sometimes, if they force your opponent to react passively.
Yeah, it makes total sense. The spinny hook just makes it so strong. But in those situations where I am in a position to do something about it, which basically, given the rack that I had, I'm playing something in that area no matter what. It's really down to jut or jet. So this felt like just the correct difference between scores for me to say, well, geez, jut scoring 28, leaving the much better E on the leave, or jet scoring 8 extra points, 36. I went with jet. I could see an argument for jut being better just because that E is so much better to combine, for example, with the P or O of poined. I'm just going to bingo so much more often holding an E. But also, I took a look on the board and I noticed there are very, very few E's on the board. There are a ton still to draw. So I didn't want to get too hung up on keeping an E when I could easily just redraw one after this play a large majority of the time. So I took the extra 8 points here. These two plays are neck and neck in simulation, with Jut actually coming out maybe the tiniest bit ahead. And it's back over to you, and you've got just like fog nose or something like that here, I believe.
Yeah, hog nose, except with a with an F exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and I will say one thing maybe the engine is liking about Jet, which will become pertinent as I discuss my play, is Jet does give back some counterplay to the left, right? There are a lot of letters that go in front of IT as well as PE, so I could sometimes not only score there, but also perhaps create a bingo line that, especially since you're going to be slightly ahead, could become a nuisance for you to deal with, right? Jet doesn't have that possibility. There are not a lot of long words ending in a J. So that might be another reason why, the engine ever so slightly prefers just. But in this case, I was, pretty happy to just play Fog on the top right there. It doesn't really reopen a whole lot. It's tough to end in an F, but it scores very well. Gives me 27 points. Gets rid of my three worst tiles by far on my rack, and keeps NOSE, which is a very good leave. I've got plenty of space to work with, so I didn't feel. I'm only down 46. It's early. There's two blanks out. There's no need to panic here, guys. I don't need to sacrifice to force open a line. I've got the P and the O on the left. I've still got meows. I've got the R and relearns. I've even got the T and musty, which is a little bit of a sneaky line there. So I've got plenty of space to bingo if I can draw something reasonable. Happy to take the points here. Just keep a good leave and, deprive Will of that scoring spot that he can use to continue building his advantage.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense for sure. So back over to me, and maybe one of the reasons again that you want to shed that U when I have a chance to do so, in addition to avoiding making that nice parallel play that Mack ended up using. If I draw something like the V or the W, I immediately start to have very constrained options, and that is exactly what happened to me here. I'm still feeling good. I've got a decent sized lead, and it's going to be bigger after this play. Something like Virtue maybe isn't as bad as it looks at first glance, just because it's not that easy for Mac to have a letter that goes on top of the U that plays productively going across here, but maybe more of a gut reaction of not wanting to open a triple when it's not that necessary. Oddly, I do end up opening a triple anyway with Fiver, but this F is not that easy to use at all. So did I really open that good of a triple with this? Maybe you could have something like, Heft or something, or even just a K, Kif or Kaf or something scores well. Maybe actually Virtue, despite the fact that it looks like it opens more of a free shot at a longer triple, probably worth doing just to get the V and U off the rack together, which Fiver does not accomplish. So a little bit of a mistake, I think, for me here if I had it to do over again. Virtue doesn't really seem as bad as my gut suggested that it was at first, but not a huge issue. I wouldn't say that's like an instant game loser or anything like that. And I believe this was your rack to follow up here, Mac.
Yeah, so I play a Fog and I draw a Cog, which at first feels a little bit frustrating, right? Like the O and the G were the two tiles I wanted to get rid of it, and I draw them both back. But this actually yields me a pretty solid play. This rack, I do have Congos as a 7, Congoes,
Mm.
which does not fit on the board. I can play Congos under my making Mick to the triple. However, if I play Kogons, I get 3 more points just by virtue of getting the G on that important double letter score. And yes, I do burn my S, but I absolutely have to make this play. It scores really nicely, just about ties the game. Turning over 6 tiles into this pool is great. There's still 2 blanks in scene. We're already at the midway point of the game. So, as long as those blanks are in the pool, turnover is going to only become more and more significant because as the pool depletes, the chances of drawing one of the blanks with every play increases. So playing 6 tiles here is great. Scoring is great. This does open a lot more lines on the right-hand side of the board. This is probably going to be a fairly open board for the rest of the game, which, as the player who's been kind of down a tempo for most of the game, I'm fine with. Will could have anything after Fiver. I got the sense he wasn't on a super strong rack given his last couple of plays, so I was happy, being a little bit aggressive here, figuring maybe if I can draw a blank and some good stuff, I'll have the upper hand. And there's just nothing here really else to consider. That's the biggest reason ultimately why I played this. There's just no other play that scores anywhere near this number of points.
Yep, makes complete sense. Picking the option that scores 43 instead of the anagram that scores 40, no real difference between them. Makes a ton of sense. And I was sitting there thinking, man, if you don't have a C, I'm just going to play Tautened and be very happy with my life and maybe draw the second blank. And then I'll go on to have a great day on day 4. But yeah, this is where things kind of the wheels fall off of the bus for me here. So yeah, this is a tough turn. I've got the first blank, which is great news. Really happy to draw that. Not only did you block Tautened, you also blocked Sauteed and Meowed. So those were the two things that I was sort of eyeballing and sizing up. So time to improvise. I'm looking at the S, the N, the G, and time is dwindling away as I look at those. Of course, I'm looking at the P of point as well. And I think it's on stream, me just staring at DE space U blank ATED. I'm just staring at it for like 2 minutes. And I feel like I was so close to playing it for so long, and then I just talked myself out of it. And I think the real tragedy here, and what I regret, is not so much that I played a phony here of re-update, which again I had this tortured rationale behind that. But what really gets me here is that compared to either re-update or depurate, a play like Tufa is just fine here. This is like a 1 or 2 point valuation mistake over depurate. Even if I have 100% confidence in both of those words, this play is actually pretty good. So if I have any doubt in depurate, this is what should be getting played here. It's not even that bad compared to, because what happens after this, right? I leave DEE blank with a P on one side of the board and an S on the other to play an 8-letter word that hits a triple instead of scoring 61. I sacrificed a few points now for a not quite guaranteed, but a great shot at hitting 80 plus on my next turn. So to me, this is the classic situation where I look over at the clock. I've spent 4 or 5 minutes on this turn and I see my time dwindling and I kind of panicked in that moment, if I'm honest. And I just let this kind of tortured rationale get the best of me and played re-update, which sounds kind of like a word. It sounds enough like a word to play. And I'm sure I've guessed this word when looking at that alphagram in study, which is part of why I did it. But you were absolutely all over it, wasted no time, in part probably because you just saw depurate in there and said, yeah, that's the word. If there was another word, I would know for sure that this was it. So yeah, tough one. What was your thought when you saw this get played, Mac?
Yeah, no, I did know pretty quickly that it wasn't a word. I think that's a big reason, right? Is it certainly sounds plausible, and the rewords are one of the trickiest bunches in Scrabble to keep track of. You hear about ings on re. There's all these prefixes and suffixes that there's really no rhyme or reason, frankly, in the Scrabble dictionary why some of them are words, why some of there aren't. There are words that are valid that sound way more implausible than re-update. So I think, like Will said, the biggest reason I knew for sure it wasn't good was I immediately saw depurate and knew that didn't have an anagram. So my first instinct, which I guess was somewhat correct, but not exactly correct, was that re-update was probably valid in Collins. I personally don't.
Not even that. Yeah, so
Yeah,
sad.
I personally don't study Collins, and I know Will is mostly a Collins player at this point and was kind of reverting back to NWL for this championship. So I figured that was most likely what happened. I figured he almost certainly would have seen depurate and maybe they were both valid in Collins. I wasn't really sure, and frankly, it wasn't in my best interest, right, to spend a lot of energy trying to figure out why Will thought that might be good or anything. Like I needed to just kind of put that out of my mind as much as possible and focus on making my best play here. Now, that being said, what Will played is important in the sense that I now know his full rack. So I was fully aware at this point that Will could bingo with depurate from the P in point. Or not from the P, through the P, I should say. So it doesn't get to the triple, but it was the only valid bingo I saw. I spent some time asking myself whether he had anything from the S in Kogans. I figured that he probably did, so I actually decided to make the play I made of O and pretty quickly. It was the play I was more or less planning to make even before Will made his play because I don't have a playable bingo here. It scores very well and it keeps EINRT, which is super likely to hit a bingo on either side of the board. And it just so happens that this play does block Will's bingo of depurate.
Yeah, makes total sense. It's just a good equity play, even separate from the precise situation where now seeing my letters, you can see it blocks the word that I should have played. And as soon as you play this, I basically am thinking to myself, oh yeah, I knew it. I knew. And I felt like as the whatever seconds dissipated after losing that challenge, I sort of knew like, yeah, it was depurated that whole time. Depurate that whole time, wasn't it? And this was just the extra confirmation of what had happened. But my chances are still decent in this game. I'm not out of it by any stretch. You haven't scored that much on that play. I should be playing Tufa here for sure, just to leave DEE blank and get rid of the U. But now I think I played Def very quickly, and it really is only maybe again, two-ish valuation points lower down. Even though, yeah, I get 3 more points and leave DEE, I'm still going to bingo a lot of the time after playing this play. But as it turns out, maybe I would have wanted to use one more vowel here, so I do play Def for 21 to get pretty close on the scoreboard. But then, of course, after playing OH, leaving really nice leave of Niter, you draw ED, Mack, and things get worse for me in a hurry and better for you.
Yeah, not much to think about on my turn here. I knew before Will played Def, I was expecting him to play in that part of the board, and I was all set to play Sintered from the S and Kogans, which is exactly what I did. But yeah, there's no reason not to take Sintered here. It's both my safest and my highest scoring bingo. And I knew that with Will having AEUT blank, putting a D there was often going to result in me getting hit with an ATED bingo on the bottom right. I was fully aware of that possibility, but I knew even if he hit that, I was still going to be up a small amount of points in the tempo, and I was still going to be in the driver's seat most likely.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Even though that's likely or possible, got to take your 80 and you're still in good shape after I get my bingo there. And it gets better for you though because I draw 2 vowels and I do think about just playing gâteau here, but I think that ale is justified. Again, just also now looking that there is a slight consonant imbalance in the pool, I might be a little bit likelier to get at least 1 and maybe 2 consonants that are going to fill out the rest of my rack. I think this is a reasonable play. Also, remember, we've been saying I am now in a little bit of time pressure. So the fact that this is a top simming play that I was able to make quickly, I'm okay with this. And I'm just hoping to get something down ASAP. But you, on the other hand, draw very weirdly after your bingo. And this is probably not what you want to see here.
Yeah, definitely not, right? Because keep in mind at this point, I still know that I pretty much knew that you had AETU blank still, right? I mean, theoretically, I can only know for sure you have TU blank at this point by process of elimination, but I knew that you pretty much drew AE, right? Because any other reasonable draw, you would have bingoed to that D. And looking at the pool, it makes a ton of sense, right? Given all those A's and E's you still see left, that's what you would have drawn. So I totally had you still on AETU blank, and that meant my priority felt like it had to be blocking this D because so many words, right, end in ATED. It's an easy line for you to hit. It's a high scoring line for you to hit. That being said, my problem is I have garbage here, right? I have basically no way to play this Q, and there's really only one play I can make in that bottom part of the board. I guess there's a couple plays, but the only reasonable one is Garble, which scores pretty well. And gets rid of at least 5 of my tiles. And when you're keeping the Q, usually it's good to get rid of more tiles rather than fewer because that's more chances to draw into a blank or an I for QI or a U, of course, or just something that's going to bail you out. Now, I did realize I was not going to get the U, though. That's the problem because Will has it. So I knew I was not going to see the U, which was not a good feeling, but I knew there's still one blank out, right? Will had one blank. The other is still presumably in the bag. And either of the I's could maybe allow me to play QI under the G on my next turn. I also knew that Will did not have, at least before he played L, right? Presumably either of the I's, so he probably was not going to be able to play under the G of Garble. So this play does look like it opens a lot on the bottom, but given I know Will has AETU blank, it's actually not that dangerous a spot. And yeah, I was mostly between Garble and exchanging. I did consider exchanging just because this rack is so bad. And again, knowing I'm never going to see that U, the Q could really become a pain to deal with. As we'll see, it did indeed. And there's something to be said for just exchanging here and figuring, all right, I'm up 74 points. Will's going to bingo. It's a tie game. I still have tempo. I don't have to deal with the Q. That is not irrational. What I was actually worried about here, guys, was that and I specifically counted all the tiles in the bag because every individual tile mattered, right? With 18 in the bag now, Garble leaves 13. I'm fully expecting a bingo from Will on his next turn, given the strength of his leave. That would leave 13 minus 7, which is 6. And the rules of Scrabble, right, state that when there are fewer than 7 in the bag, strictly fewer than 7, you cannot exchange. So with 6 in the bag, I would not be able to exchange the Q. So after Garble and a Will bingo, I would be saddled with the Q for the remainder of this game, which could be potentially a game-losing thing, since the Q could be impossible to get rid of depending on what I get. That was my biggest concern with Garble, was having
Got
the
it.
inability to exchange the Q on my next turn.
Yeah.
And had I still been able to exchange it, this would have been a very easy decision. But knowing that by Garble, I was often committing to having the Q for really the rest of this game, or at least until the end game, certainly scared me. But I ultimately decided there's enough initial value from blocking ATED bingos, given what I know about Iraq. This scores a lot of points, which is important. And I'm at least getting 5 chances to draw a bailout tile. I did feel it was worth it, and I do still maintain it was the correct play.
Yeah, definitely ends up blocking my preferred place here. So when you play Garble, my rack contains now these letters. So I'm definitely expecting if that D stays open, that's where I'm going to play for sure with untasted or something like that. So here I played very quickly. I played Out Feast, just hoping I wasn't missing anything much better from the P. And fortunately for me, my instincts were correct in this case that I actually do not have any bingos higher than 68 points here. Other plays like Out Waste put an E in the triple lane, which just feels way easier for you to whack in response. And I feel like maybe that helps me. I'm not sure. I felt like in general, you certainly don't want to make easy opportunities for your opponent to do that. Maybe in this particular situation where I'm still going to be down a fair amount after your next play, maybe it helps me to create that type of volatility. But in general, I don't think I have too much of a quibble with playing Out Feast here and just hoping against hope to draw something decent from the bag. Maybe that second blank, it's not impossible to pull that here. And from your perspective, you got to be feeling a little concerned. You do draw nice tiles, at least maybe not nice tiles, the V, but at least you've drawn an A and an I to help you shed the Q if you want to. But now there's really no good, it's not great opportunities that allow you to do that.
Yeah, and like this exactly is what I was afraid of with Garble, right? I figured you were gonna bingo, and now yes, I can play the Q, but all my plays with the Q are going to be keeping a pretty clunky lead, and there's 6 in the bag. I can't exchange it. So this is actually a brutal spot for me, right? Because really, if I'm going to get rid of the Q, there's, I believe, like only 2 ways to do that. I can play Cot to the T of Sintered, or I can play Chi under the G in Garble. And I actually think I made a mistake here. I played Cot, and part of the reason I did that is I had actually mistracked at this point. I, for some reason, had, I think, forgotten to track one of the plays earlier. I know I was definitely thinking there were R's still unseen at this point, and I think maybe an N as well. And because of that, it looked to me like the N, the T, and the E were much bigger threats for Will to bingo to on the right-hand side of the board than they actually were. And based on the tiles I had thought were unseen, it looked much more likely that Will was going to bingo ending in that E or to that T than it did that he was going to bingo under the GAR and Garble. Given what's actually unseen to me, that does not look to be the case at all. The E is actually not that likely for him to bingo to because the pool is much more vowel heavy than I gave it credit for, and there's already three E's left. The T is also really hard to bingo to with that pool without an N or an S or something that naturally goes before it. And there's a lot of big threats under the G that he could have. A lot of words ending in ITE, that kind of thing. So I probably should have gone with QI if I get rid of the Q here, which is certainly not something I have to do, as I'll get to in just a minute. I think part of my logic too with Cot was thinking I have the I and I might often hit a big play under the G on my next turn. If I draw one of the A's, I do have KV, CAVIE over there. If I draw the L, I'd have Kevil. So that's not a terrible idea. But QI does, I think, given the pool, block a lot more of Will's possible bingos. And I should, in most cases, probably go on to win this game when Will doesn't bingo. It's not a guarantee. There is a big threat I have to worry about in the bottom left that Will could play Wee, WHEE, to the left of Outfeast, which would score over 60 points. And if I do play QI on the bottom, right, and then I don't have a great follow-up like I might after Caught with KV or Kevil, then we might actually be enough for Will, especially if he has a good rack on his next turn. So that was something I was a little worried about and made me choose Cot over Chi. That being said, Chi probably is a little bit better in this position just because it blocks so many bingos under the G. Also blocks a lot of like ATE bingos that play above the GAR, two sevens ending in ATE that play with Ag, Ta, and I think here though the best play is honestly probably to just play KV immediately with GI and AE. It looks weird because it saves the Q, and I did strongly consider this play, and I ultimately just decided I was too spooked by the idea of having the Q. But here's the thing: if Will doesn't bingo or play we, two situations in which I'm almost probably or almost certainly sunk, I think, regardless of what play I make in the majority of circumstances. If Will doesn't do either of those, I'm in great shape after KV. Even if I get stuck with the Q, I'm going to be up almost 70 points here, and I'm going to have other tiles on my rack. I should be able to keep pace with him enough in the end game that the 20 points for the Q are not enough for him to outscore me in most situations. So I think I was a little too afraid of a Q stick. The other nice thing about KV, there's actually two other nice things. One other nice thing is that I have by far a greater chance of drawing the blank. And it's not even so much that I need the blank, like the blank will be nice for me to get rid of the Q, but it's more that if Will doesn't have the blank, it's going to be really hard for him to bingo looking at that pool. So it's probably just as important for me to get the blank to deprive Will of it as it is for me to actually have it for myself. And Kiwi obviously playing five tiles instead of two this late in the game gives me a tremendously greater chance of getting it if Will doesn't already have it, which he very well might. In fact, he's likely to have it after Outfeast having drawn 7 out of 13, right? His odds are, between 50 and 60% of having it. But that means there's still a good enough chance he doesn't have it that I want to maximize my chances of getting it. Playing more tiles also by leaving just one in the bag is going to fare better for me when Will doesn't bingo because that means there's less wiggle room for him to try to fish and groom his rack to bingo out or bingo on his next turn, right? If I leave 4 in the bag and he has a clunky rack, he can often get rid of 2 or 3 tiles and leave me with a very difficult 1 in the bag or 2 in the bag position. Playing KV and accelerating the end of the game, it's a little less comfortable, so to speak, as it's more forcing and there's a lot more instant losses. But realistically, I don't think plays like QI or COT beat enough of his bingos or big plays like we to justify playing slow. I think I need to be a little more aggressive here, score more immediately, give myself more chance at the blank, and not be that afraid of this Q that I'm often going to get stuck with. Yeah, really tough call, but I think KV might have been a little better here. Really hard to say, though.
Yeah, it's brutal because the Q really does seem like a total
Yeah.
albatross here. So the instinct to dump it makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately for me, I kind of have a golden opportunity here to do a lot of interesting things. This was the rack that I had with a bunch of E's and the B and the W, which is, I don't know, I feel like this is a decent draw in the form of ITE. You alluded to it before that a word ending in those letters is going to play underneath here. But I didn't have enough time to properly process this, and I just quickly played B to get a good scoring play down and hope for the best. But with the ability to think a little more deeply, this situation, I'm down by a little bit more than 40. It's really not that bad. All I had to do is get a bingo down and not and you don't have a bingo, and I'm going to be in good shape a lot of the time. I do have to worry that this spot in particular feels like it's going to maybe sometimes score a lot of points for you. So, probably covering up this spot in some way, shape, or form is a good idea. The key, though, is I really think I have to get rid of the W here. That is the real albatross for me on this turn. It's going to prevent me from bingoing a lot of times, even when I draw something kind of flexible from the bag. So I have a number of ways of doing that. I could just play this right here, emptying the bag and hoping for a phenomenal draw that makes it difficult for you to block all my options. I do feel like with the aid of a fully empty bag, and even if you've mistracked, as you mentioned, I think you'll probably have time to get your tracking right in the end game and make sure that you make a blocking play that cuts off everything available to me. I think I'm kind of thinking now that given that I probably need the second blank to win this game anyway, a really nice idea is to just play Ween for me here, setting up my case T at the top of the board in a spot where if I do draw the blank, yeah, I do keep, BEIT, but I do feel like the B being the first letter of bingos and the T being the third is definitely possible. There are certainly things that I can draw that will go across here and let me bingo out at the top of the board, and ultimately creates that fog of war for you to not be 100% sure what you need to block as well. So I think something like this, even though, yeah, B scores many, many more points, I need to not worry about maximizing my point total right now. I should be maximizing my bingo chances on this board. That's the way I'm going to end up stealing this game away. So a bit of a mistake, but I was really under quite a bit of time pressure at this point. So I end up playing B. You have gotten the Q off of your rack. And oh, this is the rack I believe that you ended up having. Quackle predicted it for us. So you were able to get that second blank, which I really don't feel like I deserved to draw anyway, so I can't complain. But that had to have been a welcome sight for you here, for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and probably also not deserved on my part. Like I said, I think I should have played off 5 tiles last turn instead of two. Certainly, very fortunate to get the blank here on just a 2 tile draw. And at this point, really, I knew that I was going to be able to win this game as long as Will didn't bingo. I'm up a tempo here and some points, and I have the blank. So I just went through the unseen tiles here and sort of considered, if each of these are in the bag, are there any possible bingos for Will? And after spending a minute or so, I concluded that there were no possible bingos. So at this point, I knew that if I just went ahead with my plan from the previous turn and played KV under the G and the A, keeping K blank, I'd be guaranteed to go out regardless of which of the 8 tiles I drew on my next turn, and that anything Will did would fall short. So I just went ahead and made that play. But yeah, I think just to go back to Ka for a second, right? Like the fact that Will could have played something like Ween is a perfect illustration of why this play was a mistake, right? If I play KV and leave only one in the bag, Will doesn't have the freedom to make a play like Ween, clearing out his rack and reopening the board, right? Because then he would only have 5 tiles left. After Cot, he does that. If he has the blank after that, I'm in huge trouble because now there's bingo threats on every part of the board, and I've got a one in the bag situation where I have to try to permute all the possibilities. And I'm probably dealing with a situation where I'm making a play that's winning anywhere between like 2 out of 8 and 5 out of 8, depending on what the bag looks like. It's not going to be comfortable at all. And a lot of those situations are avoided with KV, right? So I guess a little, well, mostly fortunate for me that I drew the blank and didn't have to worry about that. But this easily could have gone a different way if I hadn't drawn the blank or and slash or, especially if Will had some more time and was maybe able to make a more board opening play and pull the blank. This game could have really gone very differently. So I was fortunate to get the blank there and have a fairly low stress win at least once I saw that and once KB came down.
Yeah, After KV, this is my rack here. No blank, no bingos. My best endgame plays are all parallel to outfeast. 35 points here, preventing you from making your best plays. Under duress, I play also a 35-point play, but 2 points off of the best endgame here, after which you play correctly. 20 points available with your LK blank right here for a final score of 426 to 383. So yeah, hard not to go back and just the game is so different, but not only for the reasons that we've already talked about. If we go all the way back to the phony here, and I do play Depurate the way I'm supposed to play it, you had a bingo coming back as well, anti-hero for
Anti-hero. Yeah.
72. So yeah, this is such a different game in many ways, right? Yeah, of course, I'm still down by 13 points, but I'm on turn and I get the first crack of drawing 7 tiles out of the bag and getting the next play, right? So yeah, I'm trailing by 13 right now, but maybe because I've played so many more tiles so much earlier in the game, maybe I'm the one that gets my hands on that second blank, and everything is so different from here after this position if I just play Depurate the way I probably should. But again, in any case, a great win for you to kick off day 4. And of course, it was a very crazy day of Scrabble that you did not without some drama for everyone involved, but you did find your way back into the finals. And of course, each of us have made videos about what happened there, which was a little bit heartbreaking. Of course, huge congrats to Nigel Peltier for winning that, but it's crazy how close you got to defending your title. It's just not something that you typically see in tournament Scrabble at the championship level. It requires so much skill to even get enough luck to win once that it's so rare. To see you come that close to winning twice in a row was pretty inspiring. I know it didn't end the way maybe you wanted, but it's still such an impressive effort. So just wanted to say that one more time. I've probably told you that already, but it was a real treat to play you multiple times. That's worth the price of admission for me. And right now, I feel like it's something I want to keep doing. So I feel like I'd like to continue to make a trip back into NWL for the big championship events, in part because it is so fun playing players of your caliber. So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts about this game or the experience overall?
Yeah, no, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And yeah, certainly, I feel like it had been way too long since we played in the tournament. Many years. I didn't look to see when our last tournament game was before this summer, but it had been shockingly long considering we used to play both, at home and in tournaments. I feel like all the time back in my formative years, so to speak, of my Scrabble career. So yeah, no, I certainly hope to see you back next year and going forward in the NWL fields, and hopefully we'll see both Nigels, right? Of course, Peltier, the defending champ, and the GOAT Nigel Richards back. So it's always a great field, right? There's that's part of the reason why I keep playing too, right? There's once you get to the top, there's never an easy game. Every game is going to be interesting, and it's just a challenge you really are hard pressed to get outside of this really this one or two tournaments per year, and that's what makes it an awesome tournament. So yeah, I hope to. I'll certainly be back next year. I hope that you're back next year, and I hope that we have more games and that they're as interesting as these, because it was yeah, it was a ton of fun. And yeah, like you said, obviously it was not the outcome I wanted at the end of this year, but it's easy to, I think, like dwell on the final game of the finals against Nigel, just because it was the tournament deciding game. And needless to say, I didn't get a whole lot of luck there, but at the same time, right, like I got a ton of luck throughout the tournament, like say drawing the blank after caught, right? That was not likely to happen, and it was very lucky, and it happened. I mean, things like that, right, that aren't even obvious per se, but I had a lot of breaks like that I felt like could have easily gone my way, could have not have, and they felt like they went my way more than they didn't, which frankly you need in a tournament like this, right? I mean, no matter how good you are. And I think everyone, me, Will, who's won this tournament in the past, knows this, that it doesn't matter how good you are. You simply need these good breaks, these coin flips, so to speak, to go your way. And I did have a lot of them throughout the tournament, and a lot of them went against me in one game, but that doesn't mean that I was, unlucky this tournament or anything like that, right? That's just Scrabble, and that's going to happen. And Nigel certainly played super well in that game and the finals. So yeah, so definitely no. Was it the outcome I wanted? No, but like no, definitely no complaints or hard feelings about that. I'm still super happy with how I played this tournament and in the finals. And yeah, I mean, second place in a field with that many strong players is still really, really good. So yeah, I feel very motivated to keep working on my game because as well as I played, I definitely made my share of mistakes to this tournament that I'd like to try to iron out. And I'm going to be continuing to review my words as I continue with my YouTube videos and my coaching and everything I do for Scrabble during the year. So I'll definitely be back next year and yeah, trying to bring back my A game and hopefully make the finals a third year in a row. We'll see. I'm sure that a lot of other players, including you, will, should you hopefully decide to play NWL again, are going to have something to say about that. But either way, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, very well said. That is my plan currently, but to just to bring it back, it is a little bit of a handicap. It is definitely my wish to make sure I can keep the dictionary straight, but in this game, I felt like I was so solid all tournament to this point, but it just takes that little bit of doubt to fall, off that wagon one time, and with the strength of opposition, that sometimes is enough to send you down the wrong trajectory. But it was awesome. I loved getting to play you in this game, being at the top of the standings together, and yeah, here's to having more games like that in the future. So yeah, thanks,
Totally.
Mac. It's been a lot of fun. I'm not sure. I think this video is going to live on your channel, so maybe I'll give you the last word. It's your video here.
Yeah, no, totally. Thanks so much, Will, for getting this set up and going through these games together. It was a ton of fun, and yeah, thanks to all you guys for watching. I know this is probably a longer video than even I usually post. So big shout out to anyone who got through it. Thanks so much for your support, and yeah, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Really helps the channel grow. I'm guessing most of you guys, if not all, you are already subscribed to Will, but definitely if you aren't for some reason, go fix that and subscribe to his channel. He puts out awesome weekly videos as well. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks again for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all soon for the next video. Bye bye.